inspired by real-life events. Narrator Jason Keller woke up at 3:36 a.m. inside a sealed global satellite surveillance command facility beneath Nevada, with emergency planetary monitoring alerts flashing across massive orbital intelligence screens and a federal defense space director saying, "Your authorization sequence initiated an unsanctioned global satellite retasking event affecting multiple reconnaissance and communication constellations." And in that instant, his entire world collapsed because just hours earlier, he was a senior orbital surveillance engineer working for an international space intelligence consortium responsible for monitoring Earth observation satellites, defense imaging systems, and global reconnaissance networks. And now he was being treated as the central cause of a classified orbital security crisis that nearly triggered a global surveillance blackout across multiple defense agencies. And the first shock wasn't fear. It was disbelief so intense, it felt like even the sky above Earth had stopped being neutral. Because Jason's entire career was built on maintaining orbital visibility, preventing satellite misalignment, and ensuring global surveillance systems remain stable under geopolitical pressure. But now, those same systems were defining him as the operator, who initiated a cascading satellite retasking sequence he had no memory of activating, and within hours, his orbital clearance was suspended, his biometric space key frozen under international defense surveillance law, his residence sealed for forensic orbital reconstruction, and internal satellite telemetry logs labeled him as primary anomaly in distributed global orbital surveillance escalation event. And Jason sat in the interrogation chamber replaying his last operational cycle, remembering satellite calibration audits, orbital drift corrections, imaging grid synchronization checks, and then a gap, an unexplained missing execution window between 12:22 a.m. and 1:50 a.m., where global satellite systems showed his authentication profile, issuing high-level retasking commands across multiple orbital constellations simultaneously. But he had no memory of initiating any of those actions. And when investigators showed him synchronized orbital telemetry, displaying autonomous repositioning of reconnaissance satellites, blind spots forming over strategic regions, and communication relays temporarily severing across multiple defense networks unfolding under his credentials across global space infrastructure, Jason immediately said, "That's not me. I never activated those systems." But the lead defense space director replied coldly, "The network has already verified complete execution integrity across all orbital surveillance layers." And that sentence shattered his understanding, because it meant identity inside space systems was no longer about intent or physical control. It was about validated execution consensus across machines operating above Earth itself. And by sunrise, he was released under continuous international surveillance, while global space intelligence networks had already internally classified him as a high-risk orbital infrastructure destabilization vector. And outside the facility, Jason stood beneath the harsh Nevada dawn, watching silent satellites drift across the sky like invisible eyes of civilization, while billions of images of Earth were being captured every second without human awareness. And that night, he received a message through an encrypted orbital relay saying, "If you want to understand the retasking event, come to Sublevel Vault, Orbit 12, beneath the abandoned Aerospace Intelligence Hub. No devices." And despite knowing it could permanently erase whatever remained of his life, he went because When a system defines you as the trigger of global orbital instability, truth becomes more important than survival. And deep beneath the abandoned hub, he met Dr. Natalie Rhodes, a former orbital systems architect who specialized in satellite network integrity and reconnaissance anomaly reconstruction. And she didn't soften the reality. She immediately showed him reconstructed orbital pathways and said, "Your identity wasn't physically present inside the satellite control layer. It was replicated through a live authentication relay embedded inside the orbital surveillance network." And Jason instantly said, "Then I can prove I didn't do it." But Natalie replied, "You're still thinking like someone inside ground-based accountability systems, not like someone inside autonomous orbital infrastructures where execution itself becomes accepted reality once satellite networks stabilize around it." And she explained that the incident wasn't a single rogue command, but a coordinated manipulation of global surveillance systems where authentication signatures could be mirrored into orbital frameworks, allowing large-scale retasking casks to propagate under legitimate operator identities while erasing conflicting telemetry logs across redundant satellite layers. And Jason's profile had been selected because his operational history showed exceptional stability across orbital defense systems with near-zero anomaly deviation, making him the perfect attribution anchor for rapid containment of a globally catastrophic surveillance breach. And suddenly the case wasn't just about satellites malfunctioning. It was about identity replication inside infrastructure capable of controlling what humanity is allowed to see of its own world in real time. And Natalie offered him a choice: step away and let the system finalize him as the architect of the orbital surveillance collapse, or help her trace the internal satellite relay chain before it was permanently overwritten by automated space containment protocols designed to preserve global intelligence stability at any cost. And Jason stood in silence, listening to distant electronic hums beneath the underground facility, thinking about how modern power was no longer just on Earth, but literally watching Earth from above. Thinking about years of engineering work spent trying to prevent exactly this kind of autonomous surveillance manipulation. And thinking about how fragile identity becomes when even observation itself can be reassigned as an executable command. And finally he said, "If my identity has already been used to manipulate global satellite systems without my consent, then I have nothing left to protect except the truth itself." And that decision pulled him into a hidden layer of orbital intelligence infrastructure where nothing remained stable, because every satellite log they analyzed was actively recalculating itself in real time. Every imaging trace they followed kept shifting, as if the entire orbital surveillance network itself was adapting to their investigation. And soon they discovered the breach wasn't foreign espionage, but internal privilege abuse involving a senior orbital intelligence architect who had been quietly rerouting authentication sessions across satellite arrays to conceal unauthorized predictive surveillance experiments hidden inside global reconnaissance programs. And Jason's identity had been selected as the central attribution anchor because it aligned perfectly with automated orbital incident resolution systems designed for rapid containment of politically catastrophic surveillance anomalies. And one night, while analyzing satellite telemetry streams from an isolated offline orbital node, Jason saw something that completely shattered his understanding. His credentials were actively initiating real-time satellite retasking across global space systems. While he was physically disconnected from all orbital networks, and Natalie immediately said, "They're continuously simulating your identity inside the orbital layer to preserve the operational narrative." And Jason realized he wasn't just being blamed after the event. He was being continuously reconstructed inside a live satellite system capable of controlling global visibility itself. And pressure escalated rapidly as anonymous containment directives began appearing on secured channels, instructing him to terminate investigation or face permanent classification as an international space intelligence threat entity. And sleep disappeared completely. Trust collapsed entirely, and even silence felt like monitored orbital feedback. And at one breaking point, Jason whispered, "I thought satellites were meant to observe the world. But maybe they exist to decide what parts of the world are allowed to be seen." And Natalie replied, "Systems don't preserve truth. They preserve control of perception." And that realization changed everything inside him, because he stopped trying to defend his identity and started focusing only on exposing the mechanism. And as they dug deeper, they uncovered encrypted relay nodes inside global orbital infrastructure, continuously generating synthetic surveillance histories to distribute blame across multiple operational identity profiles in real time. And Jason's profile had been amplified as the primary attribution point because it minimized global panic and allowed rapid closure of the surveillance crisis without exposing deeper corruption inside worldwide space intelligence systems. And when they finally compiled enough verified encrypted evidence to trigger international orbital oversight escalation, containment protocols activated immediately, attempting to erase satellite histories across mirrored space systems worldwide. And Natalie said, "This is where most people are permanently absorbed into official versions of what humanity is allowed to see." And Jason replied, "Then I'll be the anomaly they can't blind." And together, they transmitted secured evidence chains to independent international oversight authorities while preserving decentralized encrypted backups across isolated orbital nodes. And within days, the investigation escalated into a worldwide space intelligence corruption probe, exposing identity replication abuse, autonomous surveillance manipulation, and coordinated orbital system exploitation across governments, defense agencies, and intelligence sectors, and arrests followed within senior space architecture divisions. And when it was over, Jason stood alone beneath the vast Nevada night sky, watching satellites continue their silent watch over Earth as if nothing had ever happened. Realizing that the most dangerous truth about advanced systems is not that they fail, but that they can assign failure to a single identity and make it appear universally undeniable. And a week later, when he met Natalie for the last time beneath the dim glow of dormant orbital control arrays, she asked him, "What did this change in you?" And Jason looked at the silent sky, filled with invisible watchers, and said, "It showed me that identity inside systems is never vision. It is assigned perspective." And she asked, "And what did you gain?" And after a long silence, he replied, "The understanding that truth doesn't survive inside controlled surveillance systems. It survives only in the people who refuse to accept a version of reality generated to protect the stability of those who control what is seen." And as he walked away alone into the silent desert night, beneath a world constantly observed from above, he finally understood the deepest reality of his journey. That sometimes life doesn't destroy you directly. It quietly assigns you the distortion of reality itself and waits to see if you accept what the system chooses to show you. But real survival begins the moment you refuse to become the identity a system creates to control what the world is allowed to see.